Welcome to Guitar Gavel, a place for people who love guitars. These are conversations with musicians, guitar enthusiasts, techs, and collectors about their guitar journey and their love of the instrument. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe button, share with your friends, and be sure to sign up for our twice weekly newsletter at guitargavel.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the Guitar Gavel podcast. I'm your host, David Still. Joining us here in a second is Mike Tash. So happy to have Mike. Listen, I wanted to say as we get rolling, thank you for everyone that listens and watches for your time. Really appreciate it. It's your number one asset, and to sit down and jam out to the podcast either for the full duration or even if you make it halfway, we appreciate that. And if you like it, give it a thumbs up or leave it a 5-star review. So thanks everyone watching and listening for your time. And I want to thank my guest, Mike Tash, for being with us here today from DC. We're both on the East Coast, same time zone. It worked out nice. Mike, so good to have you here today, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate
it. Hey, listen, Mike and I, there's a recurring theme. If you've come back to the Guitar Gavel podcast, a lot of friends are from LinkedIn. It's got a vibrant, really cool music community. If you're kind of sitting on your hands and want to jump in, LinkedIn is a great place to do so. Mike is a band leader of Bad Influence. It's a band that's been around for just a few years in the DC.
You could say that.
The guy with all the gray hair and the guy that's got the no grays and flowing ponytail. Mike, I think I look older than you, but you've been around. You guys have been playing for a while. We'll get into that. And Mike also plays in a few other bands. And I'm starting to ramble now, Mike. I always kind of jump in since we talk about guitars and guitar journeys and go with, when did you first start playing and what was that first guitar?
So, wow. I first started playing, I was about 12 years old, I guess. A little younger, my grandmother got me an acoustic guitar. I mean, ever since I was a kid, ever since I can remember, I always wanted to play a guitar. And my first electric guitar was a Montgomery Ward's SG in red.
Yes. And
I had a Marlboro amp. And I had saved up money, used my own money to buy it. And, I couldn't have been happier.
So you'll have to forgive me because at 12, you're too young to collect Marlboro miles and turn those in for gear. But was that is that just an off-brand amp, or am I like crazy naive and I'm thinking like the cigarettes?
No, it had nothing to do with that I know of. Just there were, back then there were a lot of brands that were, just made overseas and branded with whatever. It was kind of like, Univox had some pretty low-end, low-cost amps back then. And it was like just I don't even remember, probably just a volume, a tone, and, a 10 or 12-inch speaker.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you need. And they were smart. They played on the brand recognition.
Maybe. It didn't matter to me. It was just an amp. And then I remember the excitement. My first real amp was a PV Backstage 30. And that was back in the days with PV when they had those silver round knobs.
Yeah.
And, that. And then in junior high school, my first real, name brand guitar, got a brown, I don't even know what color brown you would describe it. I can't say, but brown Fender Mustang.
Cool.
And that was I had two of them somehow over during junior high and high school, and my friends and I, not knowing anything, we stripped the finish off of them and just cut them up, and that now would be a cool guitar to have probably.
Yeah, one I feel like half or 3/4 of everybody's got a similar story. It was now I better not even try to go there. One of my earlier guests on the podcast, what do you have? A 64 Strat, but this was also age appropriate. I mean, this was like in 67, he decided he didn't like the color, took it down to his laundry room, stripped it down, ended up spray painting it, I think, a couple times before he was happy with the color that he ended up with. Yeah. And I think he still has it.
I have a 65 Strat upstairs that's someone did that. and that's the only way I could afford it. And it's, someone stripped it. It looks like it's spray painted white. And I mean, I bought that in like the mid to late 90s. And I mean, unbelievably great sounding guitar. And, when, from my point of view, playing them over the years, I didn't care. I'm pretty abusive sometimes to the finish. So I don't really worry about it too much.
And hey, when guys do that, like you said, it makes it affordable for the rest of the world because the value is way down.
That was the most expensive guitar I ever bought at that time. That was like 1995, and it's a 1965 Strat. I got it in Nashville at Gruen Guitars, and I think I paid, because I paid cash, I think I paid like $3,100 for it, which back then that was a pretty, that was a good piece of money.
It was. That's real money. Certainly, especially in 95, like you said.
Yeah.
That's sweet. And you did you gig with that one?
Not as much. There's the one sitting behind me.
Here we go.
That's my 1960 Strat. And the early days, junior high and high school, I played hard rock and heavy metal. And this is all, when I say heavy metal, it's like Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest. It's all pre-Metallica. And right around the time, Van Halen came out, and I had Charvel, the old, the handmade ones.
Yes.
Because you could buy those and they were pretty affordable. So I had Charvel guitar. I had a Washburn, that one that's like an Explorer with the ends cut off.
Yes.
And then there was a local guy in the DC area that I met in, about 1987 or so, who played blues. And I was like, damn, I want to do that. So in 1989, it was early, 88, I sold all the hard rock guitars I had and scraped up $1,300 to buy that 1960 Strat.
Wow.
And I played that guitar every gig for literally like 20 years.
Good for you, man. That's awesome. And $1,300, right? So that's a whole nother conversation. Listen, when I was in Nashville last, it was in the winter, and went to Gruen and went to Carter, and Carter had a San Dimas Charvel, like beautiful purple, gold hardware from the era. I mean, like a real San Dimas, not the reissue.
Right.
And I can't remember the price tag. I mean, it wasn't pristine, but it was about, I want to say somewhere around 3,000. It could have been a little less. But my point is, you sold some really cool guitars to get a really cool guitar, but same time, who would have known 30 years later?
I have that Washburn upstairs, and that Washburn is really interesting because I bought that in the early 80s. And that was the one, I'm drawing a blank of the guy's name, from Heart was the main guy who played it and advertised it all over the place. And I couldn't afford a Gibson Explorer. So that was just a really cool guitar at the time. And I sold it to a friend of mine. And again, I probably sold it to him in about 1986, 87 or so. And, he ended up joining the Army, left, then 22 years later or so, hired the band to play his Army retirement party, and at the party gave it back to me.
Dude, that is such a wonderful story.
Oh, so it's upstairs on the mantle. It's funny. It's got a pickup in the neck position, a Seymour Duncan Invader, and that thing sounds terrible. It's not. I mean, I guess depending what you're playing, but for what I do, it sounds terrible, but it looks great on the mantle, and it's a great story.
It is a wonderful story. You had shared a picture of it. So for everyone, it's a Washburn A series. They came out in 1980 alongside like the HM series, and I don't know what year yours is, but you'll have everyone Google it. Maybe I can throw up a picture over time.
Yeah, it's I bought it brand new.
Okay.
So it was definitely in the early, I probably bought it in about 84 would be my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That was just as a one-off. the A series and the HM, and I think the HM was a really pointy series of guitars that Washburn did, but that was their first, other than they came out with a Washburn Wings, beautiful guitars in the late 70s and 78. And then 80 is when they, deviated from that solid body electric guitar style and came out with the A and the HM. It's just kind of cool. Washburn's fun, man.
Cool guitar.
Yeah, it's cool. And I remember when you sent me that picture, my dude, that's so awesome.
That finish, it's also that white finish. It's like porcelain. I mean, it really, it's still to this day looks new.
Hats off to Washburn.
Yeah, great guitar.
That's really cool. So when you were early on, when you're playing, you had mentioned you were into pre-Metallica metal, and I like that. We already played. I played the age game personally with Mike before we hopped on. So Metallica is kind of like very much defines my teenage years and even preteen years. So the pre-Metallica reference to metal was great. And then you started playing the blues late 80s, or it was 87, 88.
Yeah.
Who were clearly this guy that was playing locally was a big influence. So him, and who were some of the artists that you were really flocking to once you decided that's where I'm going with my music?
So my reference of blues at that time was Jeff Beck album Truth with Rod Stewart, and Stephen Stills, and it was one called Super Session. And I didn't know too much about it. Then I met this guy, a guy named Steve Jacobs, who, he was out of Boston and in the DC area. And I heard him play, and I was like, damn, I really, I want to learn how to do that. But I didn't know anything about it. So I took lessons from him. And the first thing he did, which really was, just wonderful thing, was gave me a bunch of cassettes, because, that's what we did back then.
Yes.
And it was B.B. King, Peter Green, Freddie King, Albert King, Albert Collins, all these people that I really had never heard of. And, another reference actually I did have was there was an album that came out called Showdown, which was Robert Cray, Johnny Copeland, and Albert Collins. And that one was like, that kind of got me thinking. It's like, I listened to all this stuff because, it's hard to play blues if you don't know what it's supposed to sound like. So, so I just listened for the longest time and kind of got into it. And it's like, like I said, I sold all the heavy metal hard rock guitars. I learned to just plug into an amp direct. And I don't even remember what amps I had, because I didn't really know much about tone or anything like that in those days. And then kind of hanging out with Steve and watching his band and learning, I had which was to me one of my favorite rigs and a great learning experience, which was that Strat plugged into a first year. Oh no, back then I had a Blackface Vibrolux reverb.
Sweet.
And that was that was the sound, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's it reminds me of a rig rundown I watched with Tab Benoit. And I don't know if you listen to much Tab at all. Yeah. And he's like, man, and he's thick Louisiana accent. He's like, I don't know why y'all wanted to interview me. I just plugged straight in. That's my rig. He's like, I got.
And Steve kind of got me away, because I had pedals, and, he gave me advice. And, anytime someone's asked me, how do you get a certain sound, or what's the advice is, get rid of all your pedals for a year and play everything just right into the amp, because it's not that easy at first. And then you kind of learn how to make an amp the instrument, and the way, it comes down to the way you hit it. You can turn the amp up to a certain volume, and then, if you hit it light, it has one sound. If you hit it harder, it has the other. And I was kind of joking with you, I have a boost on my amp. It's when I turn the guitar from 8 to 10 and hit it a little bit harder. But, that's just for the kind of music that I play, that's, kind of been the appropriate route. And then, a lot of times the pedals that I've used over the years are more part of what's in the amp. So as example, I used Tweed amps for a while that only had volume and tone. I used a Fender Pro Junior, and then I used a guy named Michael Clark makes these amps. He makes great Tweed repros, and I have a Clark that's like a Tweed Deluxe, and I used that for years. And I had a pedal board that had reverb, tremolo, and a tuner, because the amp, the blackface amps have reverb and tremolo. The Tweeds don't.
There you go. Yeah.
Kind of got used to that, and then just like I said, just putting the guitar, the amp at a certain volume, and then just controlling it all from the guitar.
It's pretty awesome, and that's how you still play today with your bands, right?
Yes and no. It is. I've been playing Quilter amps now for like 11 years, which is really hard to believe, and I'm on the third generation of the Micro Pro, which is the amp that I just love. And it started out, it was just a 200-watt amp, solid state with an 8-inch speaker, and unbelievable sound. Some people should give me a hard time about it, that say, how can I play a solid state amp? They're all tube, and I was a tube snob too, and now those same guys have 5 Quilter amps. It weighs 17 pounds and it just sounds great. And so that one has tremolo and vibrato, or tremolo and reverb built into it, but the new one has 2 channels, and they're 2 identical channels, so I can have one set like a Fender-ish sound and the other set like a Marshall-ish sound. And that has, now the newer one has a 12-inch speaker, and it's just amazing. I mean, I just plug direct into that.
Doesn't it feel good when you're happy with what you've got and you found, what you were looking for?
Oh, tell me when I get that point. Yeah.
Well, let's go back, because Bad Influence started, like, that may have not been the first band, but maybe the first real band. But let's go back, if there was a junior high or high school band, and then into Bad Influence, because it started late 80s.
So in junior high and high school, I messed around and always just played in the basement and never seemed to get anywhere or even try to. We just had fun jamming in the basement. And in the mid 80s, I went to a couple open mics, but I had terrible stage fright. And it's funny because I still do to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. But back in, the late 80s, I was managing a video store. And I don't know if you remember what a video store is.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You go and rent.
Pre-Blockbuster, the mom and pop's video stores.
This was pre-Blockbuster.
Yes.
And so I managed the store, and during the day it wasn't that busy. So I would bring my guitar in and just sit in behind the counter playing this guitar. And that's where I met a guy named Lips Lakowitz, who had a blues band called Tough Luck. And that's where I met, again, Steve Jacobs. But I also met another customer, a guy named Rick Havland. And Rick was from the DC area, but he lived in Key West. And he knew a bunch of people who lived in Key West, one being Jimmy Buffett. And he wanted me to teach him how to play acoustic guitar so he could learn how to play some Jimmy Buffett songs. So long story short, I started teaching him. We got to be friends. And Rick was one of those kind of guys that he could learn whatever it was almost instantly. Mm. So he picked up on the guitar, and then we had a little break where I didn't see him for about 6 months. And then after that, I connect with him, and he's a bass player. And keep in mind, this guy never played an instrument in his life. And we start talking, and we form a band. And he played bass and did the booking. And then I played the guitar. We got a drummer. And then we had a harmonica player at that time, and then went through a couple personnel changes and ended up with the first version of Bad Influence. And there were 6 of us in the band at the time. we couldn't figure out, and argued over how to come up with a name. So we decided, we'd reach into a box of records, pull out something, and that would be the name of the band. And we pulled out Bad Influence by Robert Cray.
How about that?
That's the name of the band.
That's really cool.
That was 1989.
And y'all are still going strong now.
So what's really crazy is we went through a couple personnel changes, and then I got to say originally, because, now we're recording, our original lead singer and second guitar player was a guy out of none other than Boone, North Carolina, named Tom Swanton. And Tom, we used to call him Jumpin' Tom Swanton because he was a small guy and he just had this massive voice. And so that was the original version. And then in the early 90s, we went through a couple changes. And then 1993, it settled out to myself, Roger Edsel, who's harmonica and vocals, Jay Quilter played sax, and David Thaler played drums. And again, a little bit of a shakeup. And then it became Bob Millardi on the bass.
And that lineup still, is that still the lineup? Or is it-
The current lineup is myself, Bob Millardi on the bass and the vocals, Roger Edsel on the harmonica, and then David actually just left the band in the end of 2020 after playing since 1993. And so David was our full-time drummer, and we had a sub drummer, a guy named Joe Wells. And Joe played with, I don't know if you've ever heard of any of these guys, Tom Principato.
I think I have, yeah.
Danny Morse, and I'm trying to remember the other. Well, Joe was our backup drummer. So then they basically flip-flopped, and Joe is our full-time drummer now, and David is one of the sub drummers that we use.
That's cool, man.
So the lineup is Roger Edsel, Bob Millardi, Joe Wells, and me. That's the four of us.
Okay, we're going to jump around here for a little bit, but I want to dig into this.
Yeah.
All right. So I want you to set the stage for Bad Influence. How many times a week on average, or times a month that y'all play out? How long's your set? And then if you don't mind, so it's a two-part question. Circle back around, and how did y'all manage to keep the band together like you have for so long? What's the secret of your success? I think that's really fascinating, man, because y'all play a lot. You take it from there.
Yeah. So we play, an average of 8 to 10, sometimes 12 shows a month. And it varies from, some of the things that we do, it's a 45-minute set. Some of the things we do, it's 3-hour, sometimes even a little bit longer, bar gig. And, most of what we do is our own originals. We have 4 CDs that we put out. Most of it is, again, original. And then a lot of the other stuff we do is originals by someone else that are kind of obscure, that sound, we don't do like Mustang Sally and Born in Chicago, Sweet Home Chicago. It says it right there on the poster, and I can't even.
I'm talking Born to Be Wild. I know where you're going somewhere here. Yeah,
we're playing the same like standards that everybody else plays, and it varies. We do everything. I mean, this weekend we played a regular like bar on Friday night. On Saturday night, we were out in West Virginia, and we played this place called the Barn of Harper's Ferry, and it's a place that they rent out for weddings, and then they have bands on the weekends. Well, it was an actual barn, like, no air conditioning and doors open barn. I thought it was going to be something a little bit different. And then Sunday we played in Greenbelt, Maryland at the Greenbelt Labor Day Festival, where we just, popped up, played one 90-minute set, and we're out of there. So we do, a mixture of all kinds of stuff. And then your second question, how do we play together for so long? I think part of it is we don't really it sounds weird to say it. We're not really friends per se. I mean, we are, obviously.
Yeah.
We don't hang out. It's like we don't go, we don't hang out at each other's houses for barbecues, and we stay out of each other's personal business, and we don't let stuff like that kind of get in the way. And I think we all even joke about it, but we agree that's what makes things click so well is, we have a really good time playing together. And, when we travel, we have a good time. But when we're not traveling, we don't see each other. And if we have, when we have 2 or 3 weeks off in between gigs, we don't generally see each other or talk unless it's something, we need to talk about for the show.
But that makes complete sense. It really does. I love that. Y'all don't hang out, which y'all is my word, might be the title of the podcast. That's how.
That's great. I say that a lot too. And the other thing is too, like we'll travel. Right now it's really tough because everything is super expensive, and most of the gigs pay the same as they did, or in some cases, worse. It's not like the rest of the world where money has really gone up, but we get to do a lot of cool stuff. In May we played in Chicago, and Buddy Guy got up on stage with us and sang, and that was really cool. That was the second time that happened. There's a picture right behind me of
yeah,
Buddy Guy right after he said, play me a solo while I get effed up. I have that on video, so it happened.
That's so awesome.
And we've played. It's been a couple years because COVID kind of really put a damper on that. But prior to COVID, we would go out to California every year for the NAMM show, and we would play at the NAMM show, which that's pretty cool. Probably one of the highlights of that, we did a show where we opened for Heart, and that was unbelievable in itself. But what was even more unbelievable was this was for Gibson, and it was part of a showcase, and it was us, 2 other bands, and Heart. And because we were the first band, we were the last band to do the sound check. So we got in there, and when it was time for us to do the sound check, and Heart wasn't finished theirs. So we got to watch Heart do their sound check of maybe there might have been 10 people in that room. And that was kind of inspiring because whether you're a Heart fan or not, they had been there for like a day and a half rehearsing to do this 60-minute set. And it just goes to show you, they're Heart. They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, yet they're spending hours rehearsing for a private show that's an hour long.
That's amazing.
Mike,
when you were a kid, because I say this because I think back to when I was a kid, thinking about being a rock and roll star, the same dreams that we all have.
Yeah.
You didn't, I don't know, when you're 12, it doesn't register, but to get to that level, you have to do what you just described Heart doing as a top tier professional Hall of Fame band. You still have to get it, and you have to work at it.
And it's funny because I think about all this stuff, when I was 12 and all this stuff that I would love, to do. And it's like, I still remember the feeling the first time I heard myself on the radio and how that was like a big deal. And then one of the things I always wanted was to be in one of the, in a guitar magazine. And I remember coming home from NAMM a few years ago. It was a summer NAMM, and I'm in the airplane and I'm thumbing through a Guitar World magazine, and there was a Quilter ad, and I was in the ad, and I didn't know it. They forgot to tell me. And I'm looking through it, and a lot louder than I thought, I thought was in my head, but I'm like, holy shit, that's me. And all the people in the airplane are like looking at me like I'm crazy, but I didn't know, and I got off the plane and I called, Chris at Quilter, and he's like, oh, we forgot to mention, we used you in this ad campaign.
So awesome.
Just stuff like that. It's like, to me, it's still unbelievable that I get to do this. And
isn't that cool? Go ahead, Mike. I didn't mean to cut you off. Excuse me.
No, it's just wild. And nowadays, what's even crazier about it is, when I was a kid and when you were a kid, if we wanted to learn how to play something, we got the record and we would like lift the needle up and back it up. And now, you go online and you email the person who wrote it and like, how did you play that? And it's like most people are literally like that accessible, especially in some circles. I mean, obviously, I can't email Buddy Guy, but I had an email conversation with Rudy Sarzo from Quiet Riot. And I'm like, and Ozzy Osbourne, I'm like, this is crazy. And I helped a friend of mine sold a software company for a lot of money and wanted to have Night Ranger play her 40th birthday party. And through LinkedIn, I emailed Brad Gillis and got her connected. And, her and her husband hired Night Ranger to play her 40th birthday. Or maybe it was her 50th. I'm not sure. But still, the point of it is like all these people who, we all have listened to and read about and watched play they're a lot more accessible than, it used to be.
Which comes down to something we were talking about earlier offline. You have to ask. You got to ask.
Yeah.
That's so great. All right. Well, I want to go back to Bad Influence for one more minute, if that's okay. The albums y'all have put out, talk about, so everyone in the band, generally speaking, at some point, at least all work, you've got one bandmate that's retired, if I'm not mistaken, and several of you have the luxury of very flexible full-time employment. What is it like, everyone working, gigging, and coming together to record some albums?
So the recording part is interesting because, like I said, most of what we do is original, and someone will come up with the song, at least the basic framework of the song, and we'll start playing it live. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll play it at our gigs, and the songs will naturally evolve. And then when it comes time to record it, we've got an arrangement and we've got it down because we've been playing it for a while. So finding the time to record it it's not, it's challenging a little bit with everybody's schedule, but it's also I schedule it out. So I make sure, when we're going to do it, everybody knows what we're going to do when we get there. So we're not getting into the studio and practicing or, not, we just make sure we're prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that also a testament to the band's history together and knowing how everyone operates? And you kind of have a formula, it sounds like. I mean, you really have a formula.
Yeah. I mean, I like to think we have our own sound kind of, or, at least our own style of what we do. And that's because we've been playing together for so long. And a lot of times, with Roger playing the harmonica, I can tell by his breath what's going to come out next. And I know, he can tell by, what I play certain times, what's going to come out next. So it's relatively easy to get stuff recorded or down just because we know what we want to do when we get in there. If that makes sense. And we can play off each other because there's certain things that he'll do that I know what complements it and vice versa.
It helps to have that history.
And we have someone who's really good that we've worked with for everyone as producing and actually mixing, and that goes a long way.
Mike, you're kind of going back to, I'm shifting gears a little bit, and we'll kind of come back to this a bit because I want to talk about Quilter and some of the other things that you're involved with. Guitar-wise, played the Strat for a long time, the one that's behind you.
Yeah.
What was next after that? Man, that's a big question. But...
So a long time ago, we kind of realized we're not going to be a major real touring band for some reason. It wasn't really in the cards, I guess is the way to say it. And I started going after endorsement deals, and the first one I had was a string deal. And then I played the Strat forever, and I bought a used Epiphone 56 gold top Les Paul. And I really liked that guitar. And I played it for a while. And this is 2007. And I wrote a letter to artist relations at Epiphone and basically said, I've been playing a 1960 Strat every gig for 20 years. And I bought this guitar on eBay, and I can't believe the quality and how good this guitar is for however much it was. And, I want an endorsement deal. What could we do? And it was kind of obnoxious a little bit like that. And I said, no, I'm like, what's the harm? What could I lose? So I sent it, and literally like 8 months later, I got a letter back saying, are you still interested in an Epiphone endorsement deal? And I was like, yeah, of course. So that's kind of how that started. That was 2008. And then actually it was earlier than that, come to think of it, because 2008 was when we did the Heart Show. And then kind of from there, it was more just like talking to the different artist relations, management people and explaining, why it was in their best interests to work with me and with Bad Influence as far as endorsement deals. And it kind of worked out. I mean, pretty much everything we play, we have some kind of relationship with the company. And it's changed a lot over the years. Back then when we first started, you would fill out this questionnaire of like, how many gigs per month do you play and where do you play and how many people come out to see you and that sort of thing. And it's kind of evolved to how many followers do you have on Instagram, which by the way is BadisBlues on Instagram, and how many subscribers you have on YouTube, which in my case would be BadisBlues on YouTube as well. And that's more what they look at. And what's kind of cool is just seeing people who have come to see us over the years and who come up and they're like, yeah, I bought this Epiphone guitar because I saw you play it, or this Quilter amp, or these Sonar drums, or this Honer harmonica, or whatever, because they saw us playing it and heard it. And the cool thing playing Epiphone guitars all these years and playing Gibson as well is that if you have a kid, or even if you're at, you don't want to spend $10,000 on gear, the main guitar that I play with Bad Influence, right.
Pull it out. I'll make you full string. Talk about it.
This is a stock Epiphone Casino, and you can buy one for $500. And there's nothing fancy about it. And I mean, I didn't get anything changed. It's just right off the shelf. And that's the cool thing about Epiphone guitars. They're amazing guitars. I mean, I have a bunch of different ones. And I'll tell you a funny story is I wanted an Epiphone Elitist Les Paul. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They were, I'm not even sure timeline, but they were kind of like the high end. You know how Toyota is Toyota and Lexus?
Right.
Well, Epiphone Elitist was like the Lexus version of Epiphone. And they were made in a different factory. They were still made overseas, but they were super high end. And I think this was around 2008 or so. And I was in Nashville and I was talking to the president of Epiphone. I'm like, I want an Epiphone Les Paul Elitist. Can you find me one? He's like, no, you want a slash Les Paul. And I said, no, I want an Elitist. I play blues. He's like, no, you want a slash Les Paul. I'm like, why the hell would I want that? And he's like, I'm sending you a slash Les Paul. And I'm thinking, we were at a party. We all had a couple drinks, it was just talk. So about 3 weeks later, this guitar shows up and it's the first generation of the Epiphone slash Les Paul. And I played that guitar for 3 years, every gig. That thing is amazing. And that is, from what I understand, they use that body model cut. I don't know what the right word, that machinery, that shape and that neck and everything, that became like the standard for the next versions of the Les Pauls. And that guitar is amazing. So all of my Epiphone guitars, that have humbucking pickups have / Seymour Duncan / Alnico pickups, like the Slash model. So I played that for about 3 years, and then Epiphone said to me, that guitar is discontinued, so you should play, a current model. So I have one that's the Epiphone Les Paul, I think it's called a Plus Pro Top or Pro Top Plus or something like that, a blue one. And I put the Slash pickups in that guitar, and I played that guitar for about 3 years. And then a combination of playing, because that guitar is pretty heavy, and a combination of playing that and riding a motorcycle and doing some other things, I have 2 herniated discs in my neck. So I called my Epiphone rep at the time, and I said, what's the lightest guitar that you have? And he sent me his personal Casino. That's that red one. And what's funny about that, that's a guy named Patrick Genovese out of Vegas. And he's the guy who kind of designed that Gary Clark Jr. black and blue Casino. So he sent me this, and this thing weighs like half of what that Epiphone, less than half of what that Epiphone Les Paul weighs. And I played that for a while. I kind of play guitars, it seems like, other than when I played the old Strat forever, I'm on about a 3 or so year cycle, and then I switch them around a little bit. So I played that, and now I have a Gibson. I alternate between the Casino, and I have one of the Gibson Custom Shop 1960 reissues. And I normally wouldn't play that, but the reason that I played that is I was down in Nashville, and we had a couple gigs. We had a corporate gig at the Hard Rock, and then we played at, oh man, I can't think of what it's called. The Blues Club in Printers Alley.
Oh, yeah.
Bourbon Street. And I went into the Gibson garage and made the mistake of going into that custom shop room and played the 1960 Les Paul reissue. And it's like, it's amazing how it looks and feels and sounds like a Les Paul from 1960. And, that's been my main guitar, alternating between that and the Casino. And the crazy thing is that Les Paul that I have weighs 7 pounds, 9 ounces.
Wow.
So that's why I can play it.
Yeah.
The other Les Paul, the blue Epiphone, is like 9 pounds almost. And it's just a little too much. So I kind of alternate between the Gibson and the Epiphone with that.
You've got a rough guitar life, man. That's what I'm hearing. That's what this translates into.
I've been doing it for a long time. You just kind of accumulate them. And then I have another band that I play in called New Blue Soul. And that one's a different type. It's more, we do a lot of New Orleans style music, and it's keyboard led. And that one, there's no bass player. He plays bass with his left hand on the keys. And with that guitar, I play an Epiphone Blues Hawk, because the Les Paul sounds pretty good, but there's a lot of songs we do in that band that I need that Strat-like out of phase sound. And, I'm a company guy, so sticking with that and playing the Epiphone, that guitar gets that out of phase kind of sound. It's got the P90s, and it's got a dummy coil underneath the wood in the middle. And it's just a super cool guitar.
That's what color is the Blues Hawk? Excuse me.
It's also red. It's the same, very close to what the Casino is. I got that. I don't know if you're familiar with a guitar player named Carolyn Wonderland.
I'm not.
She's out of Texas. She plays with John Mayall, and then she's also a solo artist. Unbelievable player. And she's the one, I talked to her because I knew she played one, and she recommended it, and I got one. I'm like, man, this thing is perfect for this gig.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. You're a little bit like the Pied Piper, man. I mean, you know what you want, and that really helps.
Well, it's also, it's having the right tool for the job. I mean, it's, I wouldn't show up for a blues gig with the Washburn, and a Marshall amp. It just doesn't fit.
What do you have any bucket list guitars? I mean, like, how about reasonable bucket list guitars? Like, if it actually became available, it's more or less in your price range if you had to sell another guitar,
I really, a friend of mine has a really cool 76 Explorer, and that's his is super light. So it's that'd be a cool guitar to have. It's weird because I like what I have. I mean, if I had unlimited money, would I buy more guitars? Probably, but I'm really happy. The Les Pauls that I have sound great. The Casino sounds great. And, I probably would buy a couple Explorers just because they're so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. What about acoustics? Do you play any?
So I do an acoustic trio gig with Bob, our bass player, and a young lady in the area named Mary Shaver. And so I had never really owned an acoustic guitar. For that gig, for years, I was either playing my Casino or I have an Epiphone ES295. And though they sound great, it's not an acoustic. So was it last summer? No, 2020, we started doing a lot more acoustic gigs because of COVID. So I got an Epiphone AJ45. So Mary has a Gibson J45, and because I'm not much of an acoustic player and I had never been, I didn't want to spend, Gibson money yet. So I got the Epiphone version, and that thing sounds incredible. And from what I understand, the Gibson definitely sounds better. However, electric, the Epiphone sounds, almost as good, if not as good. And, it's all plugged in anyway. So, I'm not sitting around playing the acoustic with a mic on the actual guitar.
Right. All right. So I'm curious, when you're getting a new Epiphone guitar and with your deal with him, we don't have to get any specifics, but is it make a phone call, go to a pay portal,
It depends. Generally, I mean, I have an artist relations person that I deal with, and it's usually via email.
Got it.
And it's just like, I'm looking for this, this kind of guitar. And then, whether or not they have it in stock is always a question too, because it's been for everybody, whether you're an artist or whether you're going to Guitar Center to buy guitars. It hasn't been easy the last couple of years.
Right.
So, I have just, like I said, relationship manager or artist relations managers with the various companies that we work with. And that's kind of who, I reach out to.
Sure. As long as you're not sending him an email every day for another amp or guitar, you stay on the side.
Unless you're like Slash or Joe Bonamassa or someone that probably works that way. When you're Michael Tash, it doesn't really work that way. It's like, you send an email and then, they send the price or however it works.
Right.
And, you have a deal going.
Well, in terms of guitars, did you ever have, and we can even go back to late 80s when you were selling everything. I mean, what have you had? Do you regret selling one that you've had in your possession, or a big regret? Everyone regrets at least one, but I mean, like, do you just have this one that you let go?
The two that come to mind, one, the original Fender Mustang that I had just because that would be just cool to have.
Yeah.
And then there were one or two Fender like 1962 reissues when they first made those in the 80s that I had that were just really, really nice guitars, and more just to have than, I wouldn't take them out to play necessarily. I would every now and then. I mean, I'm kind of one of those guys that I don't really have guitars that I've bought that just sit in a case or hang on the wall or something. I pretty much, I rotate through everything that I have, and I actually do play them out. But those would be kind of cool to have.
Yeah, those aren't, and that's a nice modest list too, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I never really had any guitars that were so cool that, I sold and then regretted per se. it's kind of like I heard someone once say, you just rent guitars, it seems like. And, I have a few that are special, so to speak, that I would never really sell just because I've had them for so long, or they're on records, or they just are mean something. Then the others are just, they're just tools that I play.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's one takeaway from our conversation. I mean, you really, it's your utility, it's your tool, and you treat it like that. Maybe not the Murphy Lab as much,
No,
but
actually, that one, they come aged a little bit, but it's going to get scratched up. It's going to get dinged. And if you're that worried about it, either don't buy one or don't bring it out.
right.
And, a scratch or ding or chip is not going to, it's not going to change the sound or the way it plays per se. And, I've never been one of those guys that like, oh, that's going to affect the resale value. So,
Right. Yeah. Well, all right. Speaking of the Strat behind you, or from a few minutes ago, can you pull that out? Can we take a look at it? I'll make you full screen. Just give us the
sure.
quick tutorial. All right. It's all you. Great room, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
Oh, man. Wow.
And
You
then
played it, man.
So this one is it's not quite stock. So it is the tuners, they're I don't know if they're what year in general. They're not the original ones. I have the original ones. And then somebody put something else on here. Hence, that's why these massive bushings are on there. That was long before I got it. And then it's been refinished, and that happened before I got it, because you can kind of see it's pretty uneven. But again, I didn't care. And the pick guard that's not original. That's been replaced. I have the original pick guard, but it's that single ply and it cracked. And then, as far as I know, the knobs, all the plastic is original. I had to replace one pot on here, and pickups are original. Everything else is, it's just a badass guitar.
I think it's bad, man. Gosh, it looks like you've loved on it so much. I mean, just so much.
Well, and it's, the 2.0 millimeter picks. So,
yeah. That'll crack a pick guard.
This is the Murphy Lab.
Woo.
And then, I don't know if you can see the back, but
a little bit. It's so shiny, man.
Yeah, and you can see unfortunately, like that's me. But they're meant to be played.
That's right.
And the interesting thing, I did a little bit of research on the Murphy Lab guitars, which I didn't know, but the nitrocellulose finish is so much thinner and lighter, and definitely more fragile than whatever they use on the Epiphones. And it scratches, it chips a lot easier. But what's really interesting about it is the way, with the Murphy Lab, the new wood, because it's a new guitar. So when I got this, I had to adjust to the neck almost every other week. Now, I'm in Maryland, and I got it in December or January. So the weather difference between Nashville and Maryland is very different, and the humidity. So that has a lot to do with it, but it's a lot more sensitive to the weather. And now, it's kind of staying put, but it's just funny because the Epiphones, I never touch the neck.
How about that? Yeah. Kind of makes you think about that, but if we're going back to more trying to simulate the old world.
Well, it's also, it's new, it's new wood. The Epiphone guitars, I don't know, like if you were to go buy a new Epiphone guitar right now, we don't know how long that body was sitting out as a body versus with the Gibson Custom Shop, last year that was probably a plank of wood.
That's a great point. Yeah. And then it went straight to you.
Yeah, and it is amazing. I mean, the sound, I don't know how, how they've done it. Gibson and Fender, with the relics and not even the visual per se, but like the Murphy Lab guitars, they sound unbelievably realistic, at least to me. I mean, and to plenty of other people, but I mean, I've never had, I don't know anyone who has a 1960 Les Paul that I could compare it note for note. I mean, I've heard the real ones, and I've seen them at the Gibson Vault, and I know people have them on YouTube.
Yeah, me too.
Play it, to play that compared to playing the Murphy Lab, I would imagine that they wouldn't be selling as many Murphy Lab guitars if they didn't do what they say they do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're right. Totally, because at that price point, Gibson would be called out very quickly.
Oh yeah, and I don't know about you, but I don't have an extra, $200,000 to $400,000 for a guitar right now.
I'm a little short. Well, man, as we kind of get here towards the end, I wanted you mentioned Bad Influences Instagram, YouTube, and that's BadisBlues. BadisBlues. Okay, that's what I wrote down originally. BadisBlues. Go ahead.
BadisBlues. And you can also find us badinfluenceband.com, or if you want to find out all things what I do, michaeltash.com.
Oh, there we go.
You got to have it, to keep up with today's youth.
That's very
true. You can read it.
Cool, man. So everyone, and your YouTube channel is pretty. There we go. It focused in.
There we go.
Lay the blues. Your YouTube channel is prolific. Y'all have got a ton of videos. You really do. And I'll just, from an observer, not having seen you in person and watching a handful of videos or closer to a dozen, dude, y'all look like you're having so much fun, man.
Well, that's the other secret of why we've been doing it for 30 plus years is it's still fun. I mean, I was just telling someone the story on Saturday night, because in the DC area, holiday weekends during the summer are slow everywhere because people in DC go out of town. They go to the beach and they just scatter. So the place that we played Saturday night was, according to the management, was much slower than normal. And the guy kept apologizing. And I told him the story about how when we opened for Heart and it was a sold out packed room for that private party. And then the next week, this was in January, like NAMM always is. The next week we were in Baltimore, Maryland at a club. It was freezing cold. Then there were literally like 6 people in the club. And my place on stage was about 8 inches from the men's room door. And we did the exact same show. And it's just, we do the same show. We have a blast every time, just doing what we do.
That's so awesome, man. That anyone who's listening, click over from here, go to their YouTube channel, because it is. And I love the fact that whoever's doing your camera work kind of gets a little, half the time gets a little audience shot, and the audience is having a blast, which is what makes your heart sing, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to, more videos coming soon. It's just like one more thing on the list to do.
Right. And no one knows. It's actually a little more difficult to pop those things up than it looks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm trying, down here in the Sherpa Lounge, trying to, put some stuff together. I just put one up playing. I have an old Magnatone M10 amp that I just got, rebuilt basically back to what it should be. And that's one that I bought in the 80s from one of my dad's golfing buddies for $50. And nothing sounds like a Magnatone. It's just a cool sounding amp. and I've used it on every record for at least like one song, but it never sounded like it should. Someone had done some work on it, put the wrong speaker in. So now I got it rebuilt back to what it should be. And I did a quick video playing a Gibson Custom Shop Explorer.
Yes, I saw that one. Yeah.
And that thing sounds cool.
And it brings joy. Yeah, that's what it's about, dude. That's so great. Mike, I think we're probably at a good wrap point. I want to thank you so much for your time. This has been a really wonderful and fun conversation. Love your energy, but importantly, thank you for your time and committing to this. And I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's fun.
It was a blast. All right, give me the 2-click steps out of here. Everybody, thanks for hanging on this far. Appreciate your time as well. To everyone that's been watching and listening. Tune in for the next Guitar Gavel podcast. Again, Mike, thanks so much. Hold on one second. We'll wrap this up.
Thanks, Dave.